You ready to talk about Omega, Kyle?
Absolutely.
Or should I say the Alpha and the Omega?
And the Sigma?
There's a Sigma in there as well, but there's no character called Sigma.
And the Beta? Delta. We skip Beta. There's the Scapes.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, we've done it. We've got to the end of the Omega raids, and we have thoughts, and we would like to talk about those thoughts, and that's what we're going to do here today. But first, I want to remind everybody that we've got a lovely podcast called the Grinding Gear Podcast as a companion piece to everything that we're doing here on YouTube. So if you want to hear our thoughts about the latest gaming news, Microsoft's defense was that Activision Blizzard doesn't make any must-have games.
Yeah.
What games we're playing outside of Final Fantasy XIV. And also actually a little bit of Final Fantasy XIV talk. We actually talked about what we thought of that Monster Hunter trial this week. Go subscribe to the Grinding Gear Podcast, wherever it is you get your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Pocket Casts. What's the other one? Google. That's right. Google has a podcast thing. I don't know. It's on Android. I have an Apple phone. I don't know how it works. But go subscribe and enjoy. It's me and Kyle hanging out, having a good time. I want to know your overall thoughts because I didn't love Alexander. I thought it was okay. There were some cool fights, but it was a little one note, and the Goblin's shtick got a little old by the end for me.
The music was incredible.
Yes.
The story was so heavy.
Absurdly goofy at times, and then really dark and really sad. And to me, it was a little too far in both directions, to the point where I kind of like had emotional whiplash in a way where it didn't blend.
If anything, Omega is like Toy Story, and Alexander is more like a Shrek movie, where it has heart, but it's like mixed in with the jokes and it gets kind of messy. Omega, though, starts with all these toys and all these references, and you're like, ooh, I'm a child again. Oh, have fun. And then at the end, it hits you with heavy heart. And that was kind of surprising. What did you think of it?
I think they really saved it in the last inning. I have no notes about the boss battles. There are just boss battles I liked more rather than boss battles I didn't like. This is what's happened, man. This is what Final Fantasy XIV has done to me. You listen to us talk, and we love talking about our boss fights and our mechanics. You love healing. I love tanking, although you've been corrupted by Samurai. This game, Final Fantasy XIV, has made me care about the narrative, has made me really get excited to come back to this game for the story. Up until Alphascape, I would say it was feeling pretty samey as far as the narrative. It's like, Omega is here to test us.
Which I like. I like that theme. I like it in DC. I like it in Marvel. I like it in all forms of superhero media where an entity outside of space captures all the superheroes and makes them fight for supremacy or entertainment on their dark world that's falling apart or something. And in this case, it's kind of that too. Like Omega is projecting his presence into this artificial universe he's created.
Yes, I'm with you too. That's a trope I love. In everything. It's just that between the first two wings, it felt samey to me. It was like, okay, I get it. Yeah, we're here to be tested. And at the end of it, Omega's going to attack someone or some people that we care about. And that kept happening between Biggs and Wedge and Nero. And so I was like, so narratively, I wasn't all that bought in until Alphascape. When I say they saved it in the last inning, I'm like, they really saved it. The stuff that goes down in Alphascape, like it really made me care. My kind of final thoughts on Omega versus Alexander is that it's like a no contest. Omega is infinitely cooler than Alexander as far as I'm concerned.
I wonder how much of that was lost on us not being Final Fantasy long-term fans. We're there for the Omega story to conclude. Like, Omega was released by us to fight Shinryu. Didn't show up anywhere in the main plot, except, those small references. But of course, it was all the Xenos and the Shinryu stuff. So we were here to finish Stormblood. And instead, we ended up going through Omega's internet search history, which was packed with awesome bosses. And a lot of these are huge references. The Ghost Strain, Chaos,
X-Death. Yeah. It's very multiversal. It's very meta. It's very popular these days. And yeah, you and I don't come from a rich background of Final Fantasy. Like, it is part of the narrative, but it isn't, if that makes sense. Like, once you understand in your very first fight, like, where these, adversaries are coming from, like, that's cool. Then you do kind of, I think, need that meta sense of what these bosses are and where they came from to kind of understand, like that extra little added layer. In a way I didn't think I needed, because, like, the bosses are just so good. They're just really good fights. So whether I knew what game they were from or not, I still enjoyed them.
And that all service to test Omega and build his personality as a spaceship who was ultimately very sad.
It's very important to think of Omega as a ship, but we'll talk about that in a moment. We're dancing around it. Let's talk about the boss fights that really resonated for us. For me, for Deltascape, the first boss I really want to mention is Catastrophe. That beholder eyeball looking boss, because the high-low mechanic that was going on in there is, I'm straining my brain to think of. I've seen it in other MMOs and I can't think of one. It was really unique.
This was so visual with the way you would avoid the ground splashing attacks. And, frankly, with my D&D book behind me, I love beholders. So it was just a handsome boss. Hideous, but handsome.
Classic, I would say.
Yeah, nice little monster. You didn't lose anything when you hovered. Like, you didn't become someone else. So ultimately, of the Nero inventions that we had, I think this was my favorite. The painting was really cute, and we'll get there, but it was a bit busy. I did like Halicarnassus. It is something we've seen a lot in this game, which is the grid-based attack. It hadn't at this point worked in those more wavy kind of attacks. So this was 4.01. And it's amazing over the course of even the Omega series, spanning from 4.0 to 4.4, how much they push their mechanics. Halicarnassus, while a really cool just fight with a sword, has a really interesting sort of dimension you go to for a bit. Like, they really break up the floor. You do that cool little, Pokemon, Team Rocket puzzle, right? Where you got to pick which direction to go on the sands and you slide around. It was an evolution of those puzzles. And I really like those puzzles in RPGs. So I really like that. Ultimately, the boss battle, though, using mechanics and things we'd already seen before.
If I don't dive deep into a boss, it doesn't mean I didn't like it. It just means like there were other bosses that just overshadowed it in that. Like something really stuck out to me as special or bombastic about it. And I liked Halicarnassus. And thank you for reminding me of the, as I think we both refer to it as on stream, like the Pokemon puzzle of the slidey tiles. Because I forgot about that in Halicarnassus, and I really like that mechanic. Then there's X-Death.
And it's vacuum that goes the wrong direction.
I was going to go Technicolor Dreamcoat, but you're right. Yeah, is it called Vacuum?
It's called Vacuum. Now, you could make the argument that he's in space, and therefore he's unleashing the vacuum of space to pull us out, away from him. But when a boss says vacuum, you assume a forward, inward direction.
I really love this entire series of raids. I have never been angrier about the disconnection between what the a word is and the direction shit's supposed to go.
He is not only a Final Fantasy reference, he is using Final Fantasy spells, like the Fire 3 and the Thunder 3, and this was quite a bit of dissecting on our part. And I really enjoyed it, actually. The puzzle of solving what spell the boss is casting and what you gotta do with that. We've now seen tons of stuff like basing it off the motion of the boss or basing it off of certain tells and, of course, ground effects that have been throughout this game for a long, long time. But this is the first one, at least as a non-tank, that I've had to stare at those words counting down on the bar to discover what the boss is going to do.
Kyle, you should always be reading the words under the boss. Kyle, how many times did you die last night?
I merely sampled the entire buffet of deaths that are possible for an uninformed player. We're running blind, after all.
Just wanted to get that out of the way. But the other thing you need to keep an eye on is if he's like drawing power from was it black hole? It was like a vortex. And if he drew power from it, he would then cast the exact same thing, but it would be like an empowered version of that attack. So you would see the same attacks cast, but if you weren't paying attention to if he had like drawn power before he cast that attack, then you wouldn't realize that it was going to be another version of that attack. And this was wrecking me so bad.
And then he became like a big face for a little bit. Some sort of blob meatball.
Did he become it, or did he just kind of summon that shiz in from whatever other universe he came from?
He's like riding it. He's like in the spaghetti of the boss. Kind of up in its head. I do not know. He also had a giant meteor attack. Like, he was a lot. But I do like that they kind of respect that when they designed these raids. They put the lot on number 4. And the intro is number 1. It's kind of, tank and spanky. It's kind of simple. It's just dodge the stuff and the complexity goes up. And each one of these different raids we enter, different wings, if you will, had that same sort of progression. Now, 1 Delta is easier than 1 Alpha, but still, there's a nice little scaling and added to a really nice raid night feel as we hit the final boss and struggled on that one.
Well, let's just get into Sigmascape, which I kind of want to talk about. Guardian wasn't my favorite. I definitely want to talk about the first boss, though, Phantom Train. Phantom Train
How can you not?
Is such a just complete out-of-this-world spectacle while also being a solid fight. Like, I notice in our comments a lot, like I respond to kind of the pomp and circumstance of fights a lot. I really like it when the arena is something interesting or goes through a lot of different visual changes and flair.
It's a lot like our torso fights. It is a unbroken circle, so no directionals here. I really like when you go inside the train and manage the ghosts, get up on top of the train and just mess up that stack. At no point did I feel like I lost control of my character or had to do something that didn't excite me.
Are you trying to say that at no point did you feel this fight went off the rails?
I was really stoked about this encounter. I was impressed with the engine. That's all I got.
Don't let it kick you in the caboose. Man.
Okay.
This is a highlight for me. This, if it wasn't for the last Omega fight, this might be the first fight that comes to mind when I think of Omega.
It was called the Doom Chimney. The Doom Chimney.
Was called the Doom Chimney.
Is what you beat up.
It shows up in another Final Fantasy. Is that do you fight the chimney? Is that a mechanic of the fight against the Phantom Train?
I like that it literally jumps rails so that it can ride alongside you a bit.
I love it. It's a truly beautiful fight. Like, beauty is weird. I like spooky things. So the fact that you're moving through a dark, creepy forest, and also you go inside like the passenger car of the Phantom Train and fight ghosts. Like, it's wonderful. It's a great fight. I love this fight. I love
really
this fight
cute.
so very much. One of my favorite fights in the game so far. I know I say that like every time we talk about a collection of bosses, but there's always like one boss where I'm just like, damn it, this was cool.
Doom whistle. Like, it manages to be intensely and even cutely themed without losing decent mechanics and having a boss battle for you to actually try on.
I have nothing more to say. I just love this fight to death, and I want to do it again. Nook. This is one that I would say I think is a must play. Like if I'm talking to a friend now that's coming up through Final Fantasy XIV for the first time, or I find out one of my friends for some reason is like at endgame, but they haven't done Omega, Nook and Phantom Train are going to like be the reasons I'm like, no, you need to go do Omega raids, because there are some fights in there that are just nutty. And there's an execution that is on a level that you probably won't expect. I don't know. I'm sure things get absolutely crazy come Endwalker, but having a boss fight built around painting is absurd, but it's really well executed. I will say, though, this fight seems like it would be a little old if I had to grind it over and over again.
It's a difficult one to dissect as a first-time player because it is a follow-the-group mentality. There's no real creativity to what you're going to paint and what buff you're after. You just follow the herd to get it. Doing so, you end up countering the boss. You spend some time as like a little Slimer blob. I love paintings. I love the Forest Temple. I think that any boss moving in and out of paintings is just a great idea. So I like this a lot. I like that they tether so clearly to the painting that's going to do their attack so you can get the correct buff. But I agree. At grinding level, this boss would be a delay, a frustration.
What do you think of Guardian? Because I just kind of like wrote down wasn't my favorite, and that's all I wrote about this boss.
I think in the sampling of Omega, this is a perfectly acceptable fight to put out. It is on the more boring add boss kind of phase business, and ultimately the model doesn't elicit great emotion or excitement in me, but it's serviceable.
And of course, Sigmascape ends with Kafka, who will haunt my dreams.
We got a little lucky with Clown Man, who was built up by being the big face in the background for all the cutscenes. Had no idea what was going to happen. We fought a big, crazy clown. Sure, now why not? Omega's pulling from history and all sorts of crazy enemies. And apparently Kefka is like top tier, absolutely crazy, like destroy the world enemy in one of the Final Fantasy games.
Yeah, I don't know jack about him, but our chat was stoked. They're like, no, you don't get it. One of the best villains in all of Final Fantasy. I was like, I just don't like clowns, and he's creepy looking.
This came out in 4.2, so we ended up doing Ivalice before this. And that had the Simon Says mechanic, which kind of put us in the right mindset for this don't do what the boss is doing question mark kind of thing.
Well, yeah, because he'll cast an ability and sometimes there aren't question marks, but then sometimes he'll cast the same ability, but question marks will appear. And Kefka's I would say a unique implementation of that, but it's a very similar, if you understand it, it's a similar enough mechanic that you can get through it. So yeah, I picked this one up pretty quick, but it's also good because it kind of permeates the entire fight, which then, like any good boss fight, gets progressively more difficult as it goes along because you hit that middle point of the fight and the giant statue rises up out of the galaxy, I guess.
Yeah, the Warring Triad without knowing the reference is even more confusing that the Warring Triad showed up here, but I guess they were also in the same game. Whatever it is, the run animation, top tier. Kefka's run animation as he moves at any rate around the battlefield is absolutely outrageous. There's a ton of love in this model.
Yeah, there is. I'll tell you, as a tank, the statue made me real sweaty. Just because of positioning. As a tank, my just make sure the boss is never pointing at you. But then I was like, I kind of need to orient the boss in a way where I can look to the side and see the statue, and I think y'all standing behind Kefka could also kind of look to the side and see the statue. Because the statue had really important mechanics, and I think one of the most diabolical things I've seen in the game so far now was one of the mechanics on the statue when it lowers itself to where it's the top part of because there's multiple figures, sculpted into it. When it's the top one, and I think it's called Ave Maria is what the actual ability is called, but it's when the statue does the look away eye mechanic. And the fact that it's a look away eye mechanic that is attached to a thing at the outermost edge of the arena you're fighting and not the actual boss that you're beating on, something about that just made me real sweaty.
There's a lot going on. There's a lot of ground effects without a additional source on the outside adding more in. Plus, you spend like half this particular battle blinded by various explosions. And him dropping like pots. If he's dropping pots on you, he's doing clown stuff too. It's absolutely wild.
All right, let's get to Alphascape, which I really want to talk about MIDI and the multiple Omega fights because they're cool. But I actually do want to mention Chaos. I feel like it's easy to move really quickly past Chaos because Chaos is kind of basic. Just a giant gold demon-looking Goro dude with multiple arms. But I thought this was it's a weird compliment, but I mean it as such. It was a really relaxing fight. Solid, classic avoidance mechanics. It was just a super classic MMO boss fight. I really liked it.
It was nice to hit Alphascape and have the first boss make you feel like you were good at this video game before teaching you weren't.
I think Midgard was pretty straightforward as well. There weren't any massive things coming out of left field. But yeah, I want to give a shout out to Chaos before we move on and get into the meat of this conversation, which is the rest of Alphascape. Just because I had a good time. I look forward to doing this fight again. I enjoyed it.
Well, he's very physical, and I think that's really showcasing the 4.4-ness of the boss design. His wind-up punches are him winding up a tank buster. His slam effects are him slamming the ground. We're getting to a point in this game where very rarely do spells just fly off the boss without any sort of indicator, without any sort of animation. And that is really awesome. For RP, headcanon, being in the moment, you're watching those ground indicators for sure, but for lack of a better word, it's very immersive.
Yeah, it gives you everything you need to learn, except sailing lessons. The surprise in the cinematic at the end of Chaos that Omega's like, you know what? I'm going to port you over to go fight Midgardsormr in his prime. And you see flaming red-maned Midgardsormr come in. And this is how I'm realizing that I'm just being drugged deeper to the depths of Final Fantasy XIV fandom because I don't really love that style of dragon, the slender, worm-like spindly, skinny, Machine Gun Kelly looking pixie dragon. Not my favorite thing in the world. But I was so hyped. It didn't matter because I understand what it means in this universe. Whether the individual design in a vacuum is me going, yeah, that's my favorite dragon or not. Doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. I understand how momentous it is that I am getting to see this. It's so nerdy. This is such a nerdy sentence I'm trying to get through. But yeah, man, I was like, holy shit. It's actually like we're getting to see Midgardsormr in his prime, not as like a decaying husk at the top of Keeper of the Lake, not as still one of my favorite minions in the game, just an adorable little baby that lands on your shoulder and hangs out sometimes, but as a dragon ready to eat you. And that was such a cool surprise. And you know, maybe it was because I was like kind of mentally checking out a little bit in the previous two wings. So it was like, I get what's going on here. I wasn't really paying that close attention to what Midgardsormr was doing, hanging out with us. Also, like he disappeared, so I wasn't expecting. I kind of thought that was like something like a tee up for like an expansion or two later. Like, oh, Midgardsormr, now he's gone. Who knows? Maybe he'll come back. I didn't, and I realized this isn't him. It's something that was made by Omega, but Midgardsormr was no longer in my mind by the point we got to this. So it really caught me out of left field, and so it was a really delightful surprise, and shout out to our chat for not spoiling it.
It was a nice bit of lore to revisit. When you meet Midgardsormr in A Realm Reborn, he like lasers you and like takes away your powers. Later on, you figure out he's like friend to Hydaelyn. They actually have like a deal going on, but you're not so thick in the game that you understand, one, that dragons are from space, that he traveled through space with eggs, that all the dragons, this is the father of dragons. Like, it sets up the dragon nature of Heavensward, but I was entirely lost. So to get to go back a little bit and have a fight you didn't know you wanted, which was seeing Midgardsormr in his prime, was great. And how many times have we brought up on this channel, we just love a classic dragon battle.
Yeah,
a dragon,
big time,
chilling in the middle, beating him up on all sides. Love it.
I think the reason, because I think both of us had the same thing where we kind of missed a lot of the dragon lore along the way, especially in regards to Midgardsormr. But I think the reason it really worked here, and we were like, oh shit, cool, was that it was so focused. Like, it was just Omega telling us the story of Midgardsormr. It wasn't Midgardsormr plus Hydaelyn plus whatever else was happening in A Realm Reborn, or all of that, and then plus whatever else was happening in Heavensward, because we also got a big, dish drop of dragon lore in Heavensward as well. So it was nice and focused. Yeah, I just enjoyed it. Midgardsormr got like his moment, even though it technically wasn't him, right? It's like an Omega construct.
The raid increased in its storytelling clarity. It was really cute palling around with Nero and Sid. Nero being the one who's like researching the web and finding the wiki of the monster you're gonna fight and telling you a little about it, maybe coming up with a side invention. But as we lost characters on this journey with Biggs and Wedge, with Nero getting out from drinking bad coffee, Sid started going on his own emotional journey here. And Omega started increasing the clarity of its presentation and what it was trying to do and what it was experimenting, not only with us, but with its own thoughts and its history. So Midgardsormr really represents that entrance into, oh, this is what's going on. And it was a really cool boss battle, and it represented a brand new physical communication from the boss with the double spin, double flip kind of style that equaled a different attack.
Yeah, man, I was going to say, like, you talked just a moment ago about, like, the telegraphs, right? Like, you want to talk about telegraphs, like, you had two of them that would happen back to back, but they could be mixed and matched to mean different things. Like, that was cool. And to figure that out on the fly on our first run was really cool. And I got hit by some, I didn't get hit by others, and then we started actually, like, really picking it up, and we all just kind of clicked. It was, I would say the Midgardsormr fight is a little tame for something that, it was a big kind of mic drop moment of, oh, guess who you're gonna fight next? Oh, me going there. Yeah, I've already figured it out. I know, Omega. We're gonna fight another throwback boss from Final Fantasy. It might be really cool, but I don't come from Final Fantasy, so I'm not gonna understand why it's cool. No, it's like, no, you're gonna fight a big bad from this Final Fantasy, and you're gonna know exactly who it is, and it's gonna blow your mind. So with that in mind, I would say the fight it's a little tame. It's a little tame.
That's worth taking account for. Yeah, we were most excited to fight something we understood. Absolutely. I really like that Midgardsormr, being the father of dragons, was making dragon attacks that Nidhogg made, while having his own attacks and like an ice thing, which frankly, the ice is always a little troublesome. Thank goodness for samurai dashes that negate that.
We got really lucky with that first one.
Yeah.
Because he did one of his double telegraphed moves, and it was the one where the safe zone was under him, and we were all already pretty tight knit, so we didn't have to move on the ice. I feel like we got lucky on that one.
I'm curious to see how mechanics evolve for range characters, because right now it's simply not safe to ever be chilling at range in Final Fantasy XIV. The range characters are right on top of me in Melee, moving in the exact same pacing as I am. In that way, there's kind of a camaraderie. We're all doing things together. No fight is really punishing to range or melee more than another.
I would say that ad hit like a truck. Like, I found religion when that ad spawned.
Great reference, too, to Keeper of the Lake again. And he still did the big head thing and did a big attack, and then he did some Nidhogg flames. So I really liked this fight. This was my favorite in here. But I also just love Keeper of the Lake. I think Midgardsormr is such a badass, and I love getting to explore him a little further.
Well, let's talk about Omega. I mean...
Phase 1. Omega.
Omega, not Omega M and Omega F. Simply Omega. Omega Original. This whole fight is just a hazing for people that stream Final Fantasy XIV.
Yes, it is. I mean, people were extremely excited. I would say, though, that this is better than Math Boss, because Math Boss made no sense in the moment. I died repeatedly to this portside lobber business, which we were also informed that the Japanese version of the game is just left and right. And Koji did us wrong by taking it too far, going into boat theming here. And they didn't do port, but the lobber side, like, oh.
Larboard. And I thought, larboard starts with an L. L is left, so they get it, right?
Yeah, man,
it's intense.
And even if I understood it, it's so simple, but it really screws with my brain because he immediately swaps. Like, he flips around and does it on the other side, and sometimes it's the opposite direction, and sometimes it's the same direction. And it's just, it hurts. It hurts my brain.
Well, and you're fighting him in space, and the tank, I'm not going to blame you for it. Like, the tank's got a position. The boss is going to be turning, but there's nothing in this arena to really ground yourself.
Well, it wouldn't matter because it's based off the boss. I originally thought it was based off the orientation of the arena, but it's based off the orientation of the boss.
Brutal.
It was brutal. It was a brutal fight.
The fights were kind of fun. They reminded me of Super Smash Bros. I kind of like the master hand energy going on.
That was another thing that like made me real sweaty, especially the very first time that they showed up. I'm like, how do I get around this? And then they start mixing it with like the little fist with the big fist. It's good. It's a good fight. I like Omega. I'll forgive it. Starbird, Larbird. Although now I just need to remember Larbird L is left. So if there's no L, it's right.
Because of it's not even random nature, but I would say the chaotic nature of this battle, I'm glad this wasn't the final showdown with Omega. And obviously, like, story-wise, they're robots trying to be perfect. And all robots, when they're trying to be perfect, become humans because they become confused because they're being defeated by humans. So they become humans. I still think there are way better ways to destroy humans than becoming another human, but I get it. I get the robots confused, and I thought it was a great representation.
Gun. What are we doing?
Right, exactly. Just a buzzsaw. Like, we're not that strong.
We're made of meat. I mean, the Warrior of Lights are here.
And we have healing. But I'm really happy that there was one additional level in this storyline so we could continue that quest to defeat Omega.
To me, it was a well-done version of the I will become human. Like, I mean, it went full anime. Like, it took on this, like, crazy-looking human form with amazing hair. I now have hair goals if I continue growing my hair out. Mad T2000 metal vibes.
Oh, absolutely. How can you not?
Yeah. I like, if I have one complaint here, I wish the cinematic in between the end of the first Omega fight and the second one was voice acted. Because, like, the data log thing, I always loved that. I love the trope of, like, hearing the echoes of data logs in space, and like I love space time and the thought of things being how time and space and distance and all of that works. But the fact that you had to read it didn't have the same effect. I wanted to hear like the distant echo of a recording of Omega speaking, and this game does such a good job with voice acting too. So like that's my I got a nit to pick. That's it. That's my nit, and I picked it because I think it really worked with Alpha, and it's really started to tee up just how important Alpha had become and what a character Alpha had become over the course of this, which really gets paid off at the end. I think this final Omega fight is probably like tied with Phantom Train for my favorite fights in here. I can't decide. They're both really good. They both really stand out in my mind. This final fight of the taking the human form and then the kind of mid-fight surprise, I have a female form as well with like different move sets, and then surprise again, both are gonna show up and I'm gonna be my own two-man party where one tanks for like the pseudo DPS form of the other. Like,
yeah,
it was like cutting from the cloth of the Warrior of Light itself. It was playing to this idea of Omega being this being that studied us and why we were successful. And yeah, again, it's like, it's a trope that I've seen a million times across fiction, but it was just, as with so many things in Final Fantasy XIV, even when it's not being particularly original, it's just doing it so well. I liked it. And it's just such a good design. I'm an art nerd. Dude, that first form specifically, that shit looks like in a mono painting. The hair, the armor, the beautiful eyeshadow.
Were we supposed to split in the... I wailed on Omega F for the entire, like, second half. I had damage showing, like numbers were over my head.
We had a debuff that if you hovered over, it would tell you that it was causing damage to not happen to one or the other of them.
Okay.
So if you were doing damage, I think you were doing it right. I haven't gone back and actually read up on this. We never do that. I mean, we beat it on our first try, so I have no notes.
I think that's a huge achievement because it grows that language as the battle goes on. When Omega F shows up and does a pushback, yeah, I died to that. But now you're aware. And when they start swapping off and Omega M shows up and does the spin attack, like you start to learn that language. So when they combine together, you know the individual pieces that are making up the battle. And it's not some foreign stage. And I think this is where an MMO can feel like it's wasting your time. You get to that last 90% of the boss, and it does something just to destroy everybody. Just to say, you messed up, you don't deserve to go further, and maybe even just artificially lengthen the content.
I do kind of like those mechanics, though.
Yeah, you like a little surprise at the end.
Oh, yeah, man. You just gotta, sometimes you just need to be put in your place. It makes to me, that's effective. It's a tool in the arsenal. You know, don't use it too often, but sometimes it's there and it makes a boss feel powerful. But that's a conversation for another day. Kyle, what I really want to know is, can I get that shield? Can I get that shield? That shield looks awesome.
I don't know. It was really handsome.
So was Omega M.
They were both beautiful.
I would actually go beautiful. Both forms, M and F. Beautiful, gorgeous, maximum drip. This was the most oh no, they're hots we ever saw, I think, in our chat. It was just pop it off. Dude, I would like to take a little bit here at the end and talk about just the lore ramifications of Omega, because at the end, I'm not sure I would say it was thick, but it was expansive. If we'd been paying attention, we would have already had a pretty damn good idea what was going on with Midgard-Sormer. But we didn't. And so we got a nice little, real laser-focused look at Midgard-Sormer's past, which really filled in that for me. But then there's also Sid, who we know that he's from Garlemald. We know about his issues with his dad and you know, his history with Nero. But in Alphascape, we see Sid crack. Like, we see his insecurities on full display, and they really explore his emotions, like his emotional state and things that he regrets and things that he is fighting through, which a lesser game, it wouldn't be interesting. I wouldn't care, but it's, you pointed out that at the end, like, we kind of find out Omega, like, kind of just wants to go home and it can't. And then there's Sid, who, as he's using what his homeland taught him to help us with this battle, is having to think about how he can't really ever go home again. It's a nice mirror between this, you know, soulless killing machine. Well, soulless learning machine. It's learning to kill. and you know, a human, well, a person with Sid. I wasn't expecting to go that deep, because I was just enjoying the Nero and Sid show. Like, it's just fun to watch them pal around and getting under each other's skin. But it goes to a really serious place by the end.
And that starts out heavy in Alphascape, with Jesse kind of revealing the backstory here. Like, Sid is afraid of his own inventions. It's something that Nero keeps pushing him to be, the old mad scientist he was, but his inventions got used for evil. And he didn't press the button back in 1.0 Talamud Coils of Bahamut storylines, but he did participate. And there's a great fear there of what he's capable of, and he overcomes that while also exploring alongside Omega, just like you said, this feeling of not being able to return home.
It even ties into Midgard, like around the middle point. Midgard has that whole line about like, I now understand the circumstances of one's birth, and that whole bit. Like, that's another tie into the themes of this raid, which at face value could just look at, you could look at it as Final Fantasy fan service. It's like, hey, come look at the greatest hits of bosses from other Final Fantasies. But also, we hit an emotionally resonant piece of narrative in here.
I'm really excited to see Sid in future content. He weaves in and out. In fact, he's even participating in Evilise at the same time he's participating in this. He's like a consultant over there. But he's always been a little distant. It'll be really fun to see him come into his own. Plus, I mean, Nero leaving a bill for him at the end. Who can't enjoy the back and forth of those two? And it seems like quite a bit of this was required, particularly as Alpha is running through space with tiny little S's on his back, I guess, using his various card spells. Going through the Omega logs, it starts to explore some of the universe and some of the other stars. Like, there's a point where it talks about him passing a frozen star, a barren star, a vortex star, dying star. Like, is dying star the Warrior of Darkness's star? Is this a little prelude to all that? Is Omega's space travel what we're going to use to get around? Because I guess the Warriors of Darkness had Elidibus to move them around. So maybe we have to actually build a spaceship. In which case, Sid is now good to build spaceships because he's confident in himself again. Hopefully Nero helps out too.
Don't want to put words in your mouth, but did they sell you on Alpha by the end? I feel like you were like, Alpha, not my jam.
I mean, Alpha came on a little strong. He was supposed to be instantly likable because of past experiences with Chocobo racing and other video games.
No, he's just a chibi Chocobo. You don't need to know.
I don't trust him.
I didn't know there was a Chocobo racing game. I took one look at Alpha and I was just like, this is adorable. I love this thing. So I didn't need to know about that any more than I needed to know about whatever Final Fantasies all these bosses came from, because as they stood, they were cool, and Alpha just by himself was adorable, especially after he got his little Ironworks uniform. But even though I kind of liked Alpha from the get-go, I wasn't expecting them to kind of take Alpha as far as they did. To basically, like, it becomes Pinocchio at the end, where the freaking little tiny bird gets a soul.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little too mascot for me, particularly playing Final Fantasy with all the shops and the plushies and the statues available outside the game. But Jesse did soften the blow there. Like, Jesse was cracking jokes about merchandising and all that. So it leveled out for me. But with Alphascape, they really explored Alpha becoming their own person and wanting to go out in the world. And even going so far as to not even give us Alpha as a companion. Like, that's a marionette, a mock-up, a puppet, a robot Alpha. Because Alpha's out in the world now. And in fact, we've been told you can now find Alpha, like, just hanging out, exploring things. Like a non-creepy Ida. It was cute.
It really was. It was a nice cap. It made it feel very movie-like. It even had the little fiend at the end as it faded out. Like, it was very Pixar or Studio Ghibli.
And Hraesvalger showed up. Like, the fact that they even brought him back in. Thank you for
reminding me. Yeah, when we're like, oh shit, everything's collapsing. How are we going to get out of here? Oh, and just in the distance, oh yeah, no, Hraesvalger, he was just on his way to pick up the groceries and was like, let me save my buddy.
Got a little message from Dad on his way out. it did really cap that story. Midgard Sormer saving us and expending the last of his energies was solid. He served as this communication translator between us and Alpha. But getting to do the fight and then resolving that with Hraesvalger gave it a conclusion that's satisfactory. And that's ultimately what this is about. Like, we have a whole raid here full of references, but it had heart at the end. Maybe it is more like Shrek, full of references, but heart at the end. And definitely my favorite of the raid series we've done so far. The 8-man raids, right? 24-mans are just chaos, but they're really fun and they're really bombastic set pieces.
Yeah,
they're so different.
I think Sky Pirates Story-wise, I still like more. I just love that. I love just everything. It was just so fun. I loved the characters and the setting and the aesthetic. I just loved everything about it. But this is close. Omega was really good. I now understand why this is such a beloved little raid series. I say little. It's actually a lot. Highly would recommend you go and do it. If you're watching this and you just got spoiled to hell and back, like still go do it. The fights are so fun. They're worth doing. That's going to do it for now. And until next time, GG.